What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, the official podcast of MetalNexus.net, where you can get all your show reviews, concert reviews, photos, and so much more. And with me, as always, is Daniel Terry. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great, man. Can't complain about too much, although there are a couple of things I would like to complain about.
Is the beer you're holding one of them?
Fireworks late into the night. It's not cool. Nobody likes it. I don't think you're cooler because you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning shooting off fireworks. My kids definitely don't think it's cool. Please, for the love of God. The 4th was like 3 days ago, man. Save that shit for New Year's.
Or, like Cinco de Mayo or something else that would require fireworks?
Well, we did shoot off a lot of fireworks when the Blues won the Cup, so there's that.
I probably would have shot off a lot of fireworks if I had some if I was awake at 3 o'clock in the morning when Kawhi Leonard signed with the LA Clippers and took Paul George with him and shook the whole fucking NBA up.
Oh, shit, dude. I've been awake at 3 a.m. the past couple of nights, not just because of the fireworks, although that is what started it. No, what it was for me was I started watching these fucking terrifying YouTube videos about just, like, creepy shit on the internet.
Like, things that are on the internet, or it's something that you found that... Like, define what you mean by creepy things on the internet.
It's a YouTube web series that documents creepy shit that's on the internet.
Okay.
So it's like there was one I read that was based on, so apparently a lady somebody posted this on Reddit a long time ago, that a lady was arrested because they found her at a park swinging her 3-year-old son in a swing, but the kid was dead. And apparently what happened is the mom came there like two or 3 days earlier and with the kid, and the kid was still alive, and they started swinging. And then the mom had some kind of psychotic breakdown and had no idea how much time had passed. And she had been pushing the kid in the swing for like 2-3 days, and the kid like eventually died, like either of starvation or whatever, like on the swing. Like that. How do you fucking sleep after that? Like, oh my God. Like, and I guess it's internet related in the sense that it was on a Reddit post that it was found out about, but like, that is some seriously fucked up shit to be watching in the middle of the night.
I suppose.
But it's like a rabbit hole. Like, you watch one video like that, and you're like, well, there's got to be something on the internet that can top that. Right? So here we are, man. I'm sleep deprived and terrified at all moments.
Well, what's not terrifying is this is our guest, first and foremost, which is Brandon Saller of Atreyu, of Highwater, and maybe you're familiar with his other project called American Gentlemen. It's more of a sync project, so basically things that you will hear in commercials and soundtracks and so forth. Funnily enough, we actually did this interview, when did we do it? About 3 or 4 months ago?
I vaguely remember doing this interview, and we talked about all this shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, that was sad.
But we ended up losing it. Something happened to the file where out of the 45 minutes or 50 minutes that we talked with Brandon, both Dan and I on the same line talking to Brandon, for whatever reason, the file ended up getting corrupted, and there was only like a minute and a half of it.
Yeah, it was like the Jay Gordon orgy situation all over again.
Yeah. So it really sucked. We tried getting him back on shortly thereafter, and, understandably, he wants to spend time with his family when he's not on tour, and that didn't happen. But basically got to redo the interview when they were here in town without Dan, but pretty much kept the interview more or less the same. We kind of went down interesting tangents in the beginning that we didn't initially. But outside of that, just kind of talking about Atreyu's career, which was kind of interesting thinking about it. Because, Atreyu has been a long time, favorite band of mine. And I guess it's one of the few bands I can think of where Dan can probably relate to this, where it's like, I've been a fan of the bands for so long, and, now I'm able to call one of the guys in the band a friend. But it's still kind of weird at times when you listen to the music and you're like, oh man, I remember listening to this record when it came out and blah, blah, blah. And, you still have that fandom about it. But there's also that thing, when you see those people, you're able to start separating that, because it's like, okay, this is also someone I now know. And you're able to separate the person from the thing. But it still is kind of this weird duality that you kind of face where you're like, I still really love this fucking band and the music means a lot to me. And the only thing I can think of really is just the fact of your relationship with, Scott or any of the guys in Zayo is probably kind of that way as well at this point.
Yeah, it definitely is that way. I was cutting the grass the other day, and I was listening to Zayo's Funeral of God album, and I was like, God, some of these songs, man, they're so old school now, from when that record came out in '04. And I was like, man, this is so cool, and I love how he did this, and I love that guitar tone, and yada, 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 yada. And it's like, I'm still super fanning out, but then, like, a couple days later, I'm texting Scott being like, hey, when you guys come to St. Louis in a couple weeks, what kind of beer do you want me to bring you? You know what I mean? So it was like literally one of those, like, yeah, it is kind of this weird separation where you're a huge fan, but at the same time, like, you're now also just a fan of the person themselves because you've gotten to know them, you've had good conversation, and it's no longer just this weird disconnected like project that's that you have nothing to do with. So it's definitely a lot of fun to have that, but can also be a little bit weird, when you're like, yeah, dude, yeah, I know we're like friends or whatever, but like I've been listening to your shit since I was like 13. No,
this is a good conversation. Kind of going back to the beer because actually the day that we recorded this was Cinco de Mayo, so it's a rather well-known drinking quote unquote holiday for us Americans who like to take something that means something to an indigenous people and turn it into some weird celebration to get drunk at.
It's all you can. It's the least offensive thing we can do.
Yeah, I guess. But speaking of drinking, I have this year's KBS made by Founders. Price is right. It was $5 for a 12-ounce bottle. Typically, these things go for about 8 or almost 10.
Yeah, and to import them, like if you're not local to somewhere that sells it, it can get really up there, like to somewhere in the realm of like $30.
Yeah, I mean, if you get like those big bottle guys, I think they even here were 24. But I mean, I've been saying for a while. I think as of about 2 years ago, I think the bubble on KBS has kind of burst. Like, I think the distribution for it is so wide at this point that they have to make so much that it's not a thing where like you're not able to find it if you don't get it the day it comes out. Like, that's what I remember about KBS. You could not find a place to get it if you weren't at a tapping of it somewhere or didn't buy a ticket to go to a release party for it. You weren't getting it unless you had someone that had an into those things and could buy you a 4-pack of it. But even then, a lot of the event places would only let you get 1 pack or 2 packs per person because the retail value of it was so high because it was just so hard to get.
Yeah, I think somebody told me a couple years ago, referring to the KBS, he's like, it almost was to the point where you felt like you were doing something illegal.
Yeah.
Like asking for, like you'd have to walk into a store and be like, hey, you guys got the KBS? He's like, yeah, I might have the KBS. How much money you got on you right now? Like it was one of those.
Well, that's like, we went to this local liquor store next to our house, and it is exactly what it, is. It's a little bodega liquor store. And I remember someone was talking about, it was like KBS Day, and someone was talking about it, and like, oh, we got a couple of cases in the ice cream cooler right next to you. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, like look down below, like underneath the Jaeger boxes and shit like that. And then sure as shit, there was a case of KBS. And I was like, I guess I'll buy it. How much? And he goes, for you, cost, which was kind of shocking.
Nice.
So I ended up getting it. I thought about drinking it, and then I turned around and sold it on Craigslist.
Yeah, I mean, fucking right you did. Yeah. We got to pay our bills somehow, man.
I think I made about $80 off of that 4-pack.
There you go.
But I guess, it's funny, like KBS has like become this like worldwide phenomenon. Like I think now that Founders I know the people have been going over to Europe and some other like territories overseas and so forth. So I don't even know if KBS is like a worldwide phenomenon at this point. But I know when Bridget and I went to Buffalo for the Bills game, coincidentally, the people sitting right in front of us one of the guys was from Grand Rapids. And they were talking about like how they brought all this Founders beer, and then they were showing off their beer cellars because I guess they're like big beer, aficionados and so forth. And he's like, "Yeah, I got the KBS this year," and I kind of want to be like, "That's not really that special. Like anyone can get it."
Wow, dude, did you get the McRib too when it came back? Yeah.
Did you get the Szechuan sauce?
Right. Yeah. Shit.
I think that might be more rare at this point than KBS is at this.
It might be, yeah.
But, I mean, there was a place, another, like, kind of small liquor store that we went to a while ago, and they had, I think it was 15, 16, and 17 KBS, just, out, ready to buy, and I was like, Okay, so it looks like maybe 15 or 16 was when the bubble officially burst, and like everyone's like, "Oh, I have plenty of those." So it's kind of weird though, because it's like it was weird to be in the epicenter of where this beer phenomenon started, and for the longest time, like I never could get one, and then if I could, I definitely wasn't spending the money to get it, because it's like, you mean for that one beer, I could probably try almost a sample of everything here and have a little bit of money left over. Like, fuck that, I ain't doing that. And then I finally had one. I think it's to the point now where like they have a couple of years worth of KBS on tap almost any time I've been to Founders lately in the last year or so. The CBS and KBS they have on draft from a couple of different years. And so I finally have been able to try the last few years at a pretty fair price at a, right straight from the source on tap. And I got to say, I don't really see anything all that special about it personally. I'm not one of those people that's been able to have, I've been drinking it since, 2010, and, 2010 was the best year. I can't tell you any of that shit, but I do kind of think if it was just a regular beer that they had and it was like a seasonal beer, like, which I guess technically it is, but if it was a seasonal beer that was always widely distributed, you could always get it. I feel like it would just be like this, like Oberon, and I would be more pleasant. I probably would like it a little bit more because I could be like, well, this year's Oberon was a little bit better than last year's, but like 3 years ago was the best so far. But for all the hype around it, it definitely did not live up to the hype for me. I don't know if you've ever had a KBS before, or a CBS for that matter.
I haven't. No.
Well, I'll have to go back to Meyer and get you one of these $5 guys, and you can try it, and you'll probably be the same way I was, where you're like, that's a beer.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. I've definitely had some shit hyped up to me before and waited years to try it, and then you try it, and you're like, okay, next. Or I'll be like, holy shit, John, I'll end up PayPal you like $400. Buy as many of them as you see.
Dude, actually, you might be able to make a killing down there with them if they're not widely distributed down there.
They're not. Nobody really knows about it down here.
Well, there you go. You might be able to sell them for $15 each and make 3 times the profit. But speaking of profit, let's get into my conversation with Brandon Saller of Atreyu, and we'll talk to you afterwards. So I have the pleasure once again of talking to Brandon Saller of Atreyu, and I promise this time it won't fuck up.
Hey, you can never make promises. You don't never know till it airs. But we're gonna hope for the best, I think.
So unfortunately, I am going to ask you the same thing because I thought the interview itself was actually really interesting, and the fact that I haven't really heard anyone ask you any of these things. So
I feel like at this point it's been long enough where I probably won't remember most of them anyways. Yeah.
So I mean, kind of just when I talked to you last time, you had just wrapped up the Ice Nine Kills Memphis Mayfire run, and at this point, actually very fittingly, I have talked to basically 2 or 3/4 of that tour already again. I mean, it seems like everyone's kind of still riding the high of that tour.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it really kind of set off everyone's cycle. Like it kind of just set fire to everyone's start. I mean, Ice Nine had just had a newer album out. We had a new album out. Memphis had a new album coming out. Sleep Signals was promoting something new. You know what I mean? So everyone's kind of been nonstop, and everyone's doing great at radio, and everyone's having a good time. So even Sleep Signals, as we saw some of those guys the other day, and they've been out steady. They did another tour with All That Remains in Attila, and are going out again in the fall and all that stuff. So they're going. So it kind of really just like sparked a fire in everyone.
It seems kind of weird in this day and age that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like touring is done in such a way that you kind of have to have the best package tour to draw the most people, because there's opportunities are few and far are between festival opportunities. You want to route accordingly and so forth. With that kind of being said, is it kind of hard at times to ensure that you have the best package?
Well, I mean, I feel like you always want to, this day and age is so important. Like you said, it's really hard. It's important, I think, to try and just offer the best complete experience that you can. I think we really lucked out on the last headline that we did when the album came out. Like I said, because all those bands had new music. Like Octane was literally a promo for our tour for like 2 months, because every band on the tour had new singles that were on Octane. So 3 times an hour they'd talk about our tour, and it all really worked out, and the package is definitely key. We also got really, really lucky too with Ice Nine Kills. I mean, I feel like we got them like right before it popped, you know, and it was popping on our tour. But it's like, I mean, they're reaching new heights as a band. They're really like kind of moving up the ladder a little bit. And Memphis too. I mean, everyone was just so fresh, and people were excited about every band on the tour. That I think it's really important for this, you know. Be it a co-headline tour, it's like it's not as full, you know what I mean? There's not as much like room for a lot of bands, but I mean, us and Motionless and Wilson is a cool package in itself. You know what I mean? I feel like most people don't see us and Motionless on the same bill unless it's a festival. You know what I mean? So it's like it's been awesome as well. Timing's everything too, you know?
Absolutely. And something that was really interesting, and I was kind of talking to Porter about this while we were doing the Photo Odyssey thing. Maybe it definitely is my age, you know, getting ready to be 35, having grown up with you guys and so forth. I remember seeing the Curse tour all those years ago, and it felt like this moment in time where something was happening for you, for the scene, for a lot. And I remember at the Fort Wayne show that we were at on that tour, looking over to my wife during Ice Nine set, and I was like, this feels exactly like it did when seeing Atreyu on the Curse tour. Like this moment in time for this younger generation, like this is their band, this is that seminal album that's going to carry them, you know, for 10 years plus. You know, having been through that yourself, do you offer any advice to a band like, you know, Ice Nine or even Motionless at this point? You know, I mean, I know they have long established their own careers, but kind of just being the big brother band kind of for them.
You just got to take your moment, you know? I feel like bands don't get tons of opportunities. We've been very fortunate to get freaking armfuls of them over our career, from different tours and playing in different genres and opportunities to go to different countries and all these things like this. But it's one of those things where you have to recognize when it's time to fire. You know, I think Ice Nine is one of those bands that they've been hustling for a long time. We did Warp with them in 2015, was it? 16? I don't know. Whatever the year we did it, a few years back. And it's one of those things where it's like, I think they could feel it too. So like they're firing on all cylinders, and it shows in the live show, and everything they're doing is so just like lined up. Like you just have to recognize those moments and like really take advantage. On a smaller scale too, I mentioned that band Sleep Signals. Like the 5 of them were just out every day, crushing CDs, selling like hundreds of CDs, staying afloat on tour from just like making that cheddar, like selling those CDs hand to mouth. And like, dude, they were like, yeah, we went on this next tour and literally saw like people with our shirts and your shirts, like talking to our band, stoked to see us again. Like you have to recognize when it's your time to really to make your shot, you know?
Kind of speaking of and segueing a little bit too, and making your shot, you know, wanted to talk and focus a little bit more on just your songwriting career as a whole. I think it's pretty widely known at this point. I think you've done a good job of, you know, pushing, you know, Hell or High Water. You have American Gentlemen. Was that? Yeah.
Sorry, that was me.
No, that's fine.
It's Cinco de Mayo, and we trying to get tacos for our crew, and the whole tour, and the place canceled on us. So we're trying to find new tacos. It seems as though Alex found a new taco place. So back to the question. Sorry about the bing.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, American Gentlemen is the other problem.
It seems though that what's been kind of interesting is each avenue. You know, I think something in talking kind of again about my age that I think is kind of a interesting thing to look back on is, you know, growing up in the day and age where there was the beginning of this ancillary content of like making up DVDs and YouTube sort of becoming what it would become now. And remembering seeing a Death Grip on Yesterday's DVD and seeing how much material you were showing everybody and like the writing stages and so forth. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were doing, like, writing the lyrics, writing the guitar part, like, bringing in almost fully brought-in songs. And it's been interesting to see the growth of you as a musician between all the various projects. How hard is it, though, to kind of define what roles each band plays in your musical journey?
I don't think that I have a hard time, like, differentiating the roles. You know, I think it's all such a different thing that comes from like a different part of the brain, I feel like. But with Hell or High Water, it was just like, it's funny, I was actually just having kind of a moment the other day. Our first album was like out forever and then got taken offline, and I didn't even know about it for like 2 years until like people started writing me and like, I can't listen to this. Anyways, label mishaps, whatever, but I got it back up on the internet. I was listening to that album the other day, and it kind of like made me kind of get reminiscent of what that record did for me and what that band did for me, you know? And I feel like each thing that I do is just kind of like, I think, an attempt of me. It's like an audio proof of my attempt at just like bettering myself. I feel like if you hear, big jumps in the Atreyu albums, it's us trying to better ourselves. It's Hell or High Water is me trying to better myself as a rock writer and really expand my songwriting and capabilities there. Like American Gentlemen is me pushing myself into like the pop hip hop space, and it's just like, I don't know, I feel like each time there's something new, and if it's completely different, it's because like my brain just needed to learn something new and wanted to like just sharpen the knife, I guess,
In kind of learning the various skill sets, each genre kind of presents itself. What is something perhaps in either one of them that you've been able to maybe apply for Atreyu that you've been able to put into American Gentlemen, something from American Gentlemen that maybe you've been able to bring back to Atreyu?
I mean, a perfect example of that is The Time Is Now.
Okay.
With over the past 5 years, I've gotten very heavily into like sync writing, TV film stuff for like TV promos and commercials and advertisements and trailers and all that kind of stuff. And that's really opened a huge door for me in like new ways of writing songs, new kind of methods, new purpose, and it was kind of like we're making the Atreyu record, and it was like I'd be remiss if I didn't have a sync song, like a knockout sync song on this record. This is like what I've been doing. This has been my career outside of Atreyu for the last 5 years now. And I have a great, company that I'm a part of, and it's like I know if I deliver something, they can knock it out of the park for me. So we came in one day, and it was like, okay, I have this idea, like we need a sync song, period. Give me an hour, and I want to just show you what I'm thinking, because I can't tell you what I'm thinking, and if you like it, we'll continue. So I kind of like went in, tracked the drums, did a quick guitar, did the chorus, like this is my idea. I want like a clock ticking and this and that, and the dudes were like, yeah, cool, let's go, let's run with it. And that was the thing. As soon as you started even talking to the label, it was like, oh, singles, whatever. I'm like, yeah, time is now. Like, if you don't put some fire behind this song, you're all idiots. Put some fucking go. And it's been insane for us. You know what I mean? Not only did it do well as a radio single and is like one of our fastest, highest stream songs we've ever had, but it's been all over hockey, football, baseball, every freaking sport. We got a list of arenas and stadiums that Time Is Now has been played in stadium, and it's like uncomfortable how long the list is. Like there's nothing, you know what I mean? So it's like that's something I directly pulled from doing American Gentlemen, from doing that other side of writing. So it's like it's very much affected the Atreyu role too.
Kind of interestingly enough, syncs I think are kind of interesting in the fact that, when you guys first came out, and hell, I'm honestly trying to think of a song that would have caught on even alternative radio at the time, which maybe it would have been at least Death Grip that would have.
That caught alternative radio?
No, actually, I take it back. It probably would have been the follow-up. Yeah, Let's Sales that caught on alternative.
First alternative radio that caught was Becoming the Bull, and then more so Falling Down.
Looking at your career as a whole and kind of seeing like how there wasn't internet radio or it was more so terrestrial radio and so forth, is it kind of interesting now to kind of be I guess shit, really, you guys have already had a 20-year career.
Yeah, this is 20-year anniversary.
Fuck. God, that makes me feel old.
Crazy.
But thinking about that, like the avenues that weren't open up to you then that are now, is it just kind of crazy to see how like the music landscape has changed so drastically?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because some of the stuff was available back then, but we just didn't understand what it was really yet. I mean, you look at our song Her Portrait in Black. We wrote that in the Death Grip sessions, and then we got approached by that movie, said we want a song for the movie, for the soundtrack, whatever, but it needs to be exclusive, and we'll make you a music video, and it'll go on the DVD and all this stuff. And we're like, cool. We started writing the song anyways. Alex kind of like made the lyrics more fitting for the movie, and that did huge things for us at the time, though. Like, we didn't see the money from that. We're on a label. Like, they're getting that master fee, and they're getting, even so we're just like, oh my God, this is huge publicity, and that did great things for the band. But now it's like, it's hard for rock bands to get into that space, and especially metal, like hard metal, whatever bands are getting into that space. But I mean, it's totally different. Back in the day when we were like, oh yeah, like they're playing our song on satellite radio, it was like, oh cool, they're also playing our song in the woods of Norway. The same amount of people are going to hear it. You know what I mean? Like satellite radio was a joke back then. Now it's literally the reigning champ of radio. Like more people listen to satellite radio than anything else. Like terrestrial radio is a joke. It's like, it's funny like how things change. Not a joke. I mean, it's still important. Everyone loves their stations, but it's like the popularity has shifted and everything's digital now.
Actually, a comment I've always wondered. Maybe you can answer this. Maybe you have no clue. It's just something I've always noticed. Why does Her Portrait in Black sound completely different than the Death Grip mixes?
It was mixed by somebody else. Well, yeah, I think it was mixed. Well, maybe it was mixed by the same dude, but it was rushed. It was like we had to finish it. Sorry, I'm chewing on ice. I'm drinking mojito for everyone that's listening. And I know that's not a Cinco de Mayo drink, but here we are.
I mean, you can put tequila in a
Sure.
mojito.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we finished that song first and had to like really push it out. It does really sound a lot different. But it was. I think it was the mix was just a different process. You know?
Okay. It's just something I've always noticed that like comparatively with the rest of it, it's like it kind of sounds thin.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. We just had to like it was a timing thing. If you notice too, there's like I think it's on like Madden or something like that. Becoming the Bull's on Madden, and the mix for Becoming the Bull was again like we had to get it to them quick. So Feldman did the mix on Becoming the Bull for Madden, and it sounds great. But then Andy Wallace did the mix for the record, so it just sounds completely different.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that, but now you'll go back and listen, and you might notice.
There are being a video game, especially Madden and 2K, like basketball and so forth. I do notice differences in sounds of some of these songs and so forth. Something I kind of wanted to know is it seems like obviously Hell or High Water has become, I would say, your Foo Fighters. It seems.
Yeah. I'll take that.
Actually, I was just talking with Steve Carey from the Color Morale Now Senses Fail.
Yeah.
He just built a studio and was talking about how he learned how to start programming stuff himself, like writing guitars and all that, and writing songs, so he doesn't have to wait for everybody. And he was like, I know drummers don't do that. And I go, well, look at Brandon. Like Brandon, he goes, I know that motherfucker can do everything perfectly. So it was funny. We were just literally talking about you yesterday about how like multi-instrumental and multifaceted you are all across the board. But that kind of being said, Hell or High Water is really interesting to me because it seemed like initially with Black Cloud Collective as it started that it kind of didn't deviate too far. Like I could kind of almost see like the line being like, well, it wasn't quite Atreyu enough, so here's this other thing of what it could be. But I feel like you have since renaming it and having Gioi on and stuff like that. I feel like on the last record, it's definitely more definitively its own thing.
It's its own thing. I think beginning again too. I mean, it was obviously its own thing too. But how that whole thing started was, I mean, I started the Black Cloud Collective. It was my solo project. You know what I'm saying? And then I got this band, and we went on one tour. And I remember sitting on the back of the bus, and everyone was in the venue. And I'm sitting on the back of the bus, and I'm just kind of like in like La La Land. I'm like I was just like in the back, just like smiling at nothing. And my wife's like, "What are you doing? Like you look like you're on drugs." And she was tour managing us at the time. And I'm like, I'm so happy right now. I'm like, I can't understand like what's happening. Like this band is so good. Like I don't think that they can be like hired guns. I don't think that they can just be like a thing that I have at my disposal. I think they need to be my band. Like I need to make them my band. And she's like, okay, like that wasn't really what your vision was, and you were just gonna kind of do your own thing or whatever. And I'm like, but do you understand what this is? And she was kind of like, I see it, I feel it, it makes sense. Like, do what you gotta do. And it was like literally that day. It was like, do you just want to be my band? Like I don't want to. This is like, you want to be part of this? Like really part of this? And everyone was on board. So it was like, cool, we need to change our name because that was me, and I don't want that to be me, and whatever.
Right.
So yeah, it worked out. But Hell or High Water is an interesting thing. I just literally had these conversations with like multiple band members the other day, where like that band was such a strange, powerful thing for everyone in our band.
How hard was it to become a frontman in the truest sense of the form?
I feel like I just fucking went out there and didn't think about it. You know?
You didn't have that weird nervous thing of like, what do I do?
I didn't like look in the mirror and like do the whole like, what am I gonna do on stage? Who am I gonna be on stage? You know? I was just like, all I can do is be me. So go out there and just do what you would do. And I think at times it was a bit chaotic and ridiculous, but it was fun. You know?
What are you surprised to see the success Gioi has had individually at this point?
Not at all. I think he's such a talented dude, and like I said, it's Hell or High Water in one way or another led everyone in it to insane things. It taught me to be a better writer, it taught me to be a leader, it taught me to be patient, it taught me to do all these things that I couldn't have done, the things that I've done with Atreyu in the last 5 years if I didn't have that band. I met Gioi. Gioi was in a band with me. We learned so much shit together. Then through Gioi met our manager, who always also manages the Used. He knew Gioi through Hell or High Water, got the gig to play in the Used. That led him there. Our other guitar player, Matt Pauling, was like, he's literally an absolute genius. He was in our band. He quit our band because he wanted to pursue production. John Feldman texted me one day, you know any engineers? I'm looking for an engineer. I said, yes, I do. This dude's an engineer. Our manager also vouched for him. He got a job with John Feldman for like 5 years. Worked on Blink, 5 Seconds of Summer, all these Black Veil Brides, all these massive records. Now he's off on his own. He's working on 5 Seconds of Summer stuff. He did what's that record? What's the band called? It's so bad. They wear like makeup and look real like kind of like super flashy. Their song's called I'll Be Fine or You'll Be Fine right now. I can't remember the name. Anyways, another big band. Did their record. I'm an idiot for not remembering the name. You'll have a blip on the thing that'll be like, the band's called this. Right. But yeah, like everyone had these crazy roads, from that. So, but Gioi never surprised me. Gioi's an absolute freaking guru.
Is there plans eventually, probably when time permits it, to do a follow-up record?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know to what extent, but I know that we all kind of have like a soft spot and like a hole where that band lives. So we'll have to fill it at some point. I don't know if it'll be like full on do a record, go tour, do the whole thing, but we'll definitely make more music for sure. Kind
of speaking to American Gentlemen again, how did this project start?
This was another sync thing. Me and my friend, his name's Christopher Umana, he goes by C4, genius producer in kind of the hip hop R&B space, has like Big Sean tracks and like real deal credits, And I met him through a common friend, another guy that introduced me really to sync, this dude Dave Litchens. And we met at his birthday party, and was like, you all should write, whatever. We clicked, and it was like the first couple days we wrote, it was just like, this is good. So we just kept going, decided to throw a name on it. We were kind of like, we'll make all this music, but no one's going to hear it. Like, we should just start releasing it, might as well. So that started American Gentlemen. Played like a couple shows, and it's mostly just a writing project, but it's one of those things that we've always been like, do we try to play shows, do we like try to get on some cool like festivals or something and whatever. So for now it's just the music, but it definitely could lead to something more.
Well, as I say, that's the interesting thing about, like, you look at someone like the Neptunes.
Yeah.
The Neptunes basically started off as just a project to create beats and so forth, and then became NERD.
Exactly.
And then so forth. So I always kind of saw the parallel between that project to what NERD/Neptunes was
For
doing.
sure. Well, it's the same thing, too, where it's like we almost want to move into that space a little more. That's kind of almost like a production duo as well, but it's like, we've been kind of staying in the sync space and just doing our thing and releasing music and whatever. But, it is funny where it's like it could be very much like a Run the Jewels situation or like that kind of vibe on stage, maybe some live instruments or like almost like maybe a Gorillaz type thing. That's, who knows? Like, you never know where it could go, but definitely something in the back of our minds we always think about.
With all of the various endeavors that you have, has there been a musical styling or something creatively you haven't done yet that you would like to?
Not yet. I tried to write country songs like 5-6 years ago, and I just don't. It's just not.
I mean, you kind of had one on Lead Sail, sort of.
Ish. It was like a rock song with pedal steel, And I even tried on Begin Again. There's a song called Rocky Water's Edge. It's like my attempt at like a alt country song, but
I mean, if that Little Nas X song could be a country song, then
exactly. I don't think that's. I hate that shit. There's so much stuff that's going on right now that I just can't get behind.
You don't like the fact that some of these things can kind of blur the line, no pun intended, but blur the lines of some of these genres and boundaries.
I don't care about that. I just like that song's just silly to me. That song's just silly to me, and I'm not one to. Everyone be creative, do your thing. Everyone has the right to do whatever they want to do. Some stuff I just can't understand. Country music, I can't wrap my head around it. It's not authentically me. So, but other than that, there's no genres really that I haven't like tried to touch. I mean, I wanted to touch more into like the hip hop space with my on my own thing, but then again, it's just like, but I don't want to do it unless I fully like dive in, go head first, and like really become a good rapper.
So something I had kind of talked with actually a former guest vocalist on one of your albums, Josh Todd from Buckcherry, really is kind of trying to get into that headspace too of the hip hop scene and so forth. Who is someone that you would love to collaborate with? And in this day and age now, where I feel like they're like we were just talking about Little Nas X, and Billy Ray Cyrus working together, and you're seeing a lot of these interesting collaborations that just because we don't have another example of this that's more current, I should say, but like the DMC Aerosmith thing, like where you're kind of getting two big names and putting them together and crossing over. Have you guys thought about trying to do some of these, like, High Road Hero is a great one. He just did a bunch of remixes for songs and had people do it. Is that something that you would like to do? And if so, who's someone that you would like to collaborate with, maybe in that vein that you...
I mean, 100% yes. I love the genre bend. I love that. Like, why is he on that song? Hyro is someone that's great because he mixes them both. And you watch Hyro, he's a dope rapper, but his shows are like an underground hardcore show. Yeah, it's so punk rock. But I think a handful of people. Machine Gun Kelly's a big one. I'd love to do some music with Machine Gun Kelly. Anderson .Paak would be dope. I mean, there's obvious like huge ones. There's like Kendrick and stuff like that. But it's like I love that shit. I think that kind of blend is awesome, and especially like we've already talked to like about a month ago before we left. I did a show like I went and played an Atreyu song with this EDM group called Adventure Club. And like they like did lip gloss in their set, and I played drums with it, whatever. Like we've talked about doing some stuff together, and just like I think it's fun. Creativity is creativity, no matter where it goes.
Kind of in wrapping up slowly. We just talked about the fact that Atreyu now is 20.
Next year we'll be able to buy alcohol.
Unless you go to Canada, you can buy it now.
Exactly, which we're going tomorrow. So
I was going to say, so I'm looking at all that. Obviously, when you start the band, you probably your aspirations are let's tour regionally, or your goals are very nearsighted.
Yeah, kind of.
What does, looking back now at a 20-year career, what does that look like, and what does the band mean to you now that maybe it didn't at that point?
It's bananas. It's absolutely crazy. I don't think we ever had small dreams. I don't think it was ever like, let's play some shows. If we can play Vegas, that'd be cool. Like, you're stoked to do it, but you want more. And we've always been that band that has consistently just wanted more, bigger, better. And I think that concept hasn't died out for us, which I think has literally been like one of the keys to our longevity. That and taking like a 4-year break. But I think that like we're the same. We're the same like hungry kids that we were when we started. We're just in our 30s now. But I mean, I don't know. It's an insane concept. Like we're 20 years in, and like we're getting offers and like to play in places that we've never even thought of, and we're like, well, 20 years in, we're getting this stuff. Like, this is now happening to us 20 years later. It's interesting, insane concept.
How long do you see this band being able to go for?
I don't think it really has an expiration. Obviously, I don't think we'll be like 60, like Aerosmithing it, like headbanging and playing Bleeding Mascara. Yeah, dude, if Vegas wanted to give us a residency for Atreyu, we would take it right now. I would take it tomorrow. I would collect all that cheddar, and I would sit in a fucking suite. I would chill in a suite in the Bellagio or wherever, and at the Palms, and I would just love life, and everyone in our crew would happily come with. No, yeah, that's the dream. It's funny because it's funny, like all these kind of legacy bands, which is funny because at this point in the game, with certain age demographics, we're considered a legacy band. But like with the Aerosmiths and the Motley Crues and all that stuff, it's like you could snap those fucking casino shows or those residencies. Like, that's the money. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I don't think we're gonna be 60 years old, like headbanging, like ripping solos to Bleeding Mascara, because I just think I don't know if we'll be able to do it still, but I don't see an end. I feel like we'll make 10 more records. And
last question. I know it's a very open-ended question. Yeah. Something we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast as recently is kind of EPs versus full lengths and the shelf life of a record in this day and age now, where everything's so, need it now. I already forgot about it. Are you guys already working on follow-up material? Do you still feel like? I mean, I still feel like the record. I mean, you just put out your second single, I think, basically off of this record. So it still feels like this album has plenty of life still left in it. Yeah,
I think the record still definitely has legs. I think Time Is Now really treated us well with lasting. So we still have, we just put out the second single that just went to radio. That's going to have some time there. There's plenty of touring left to do. But if I had my way, we would never put out a full length album again. We put out, singles, 6, 7, 8 songs at the absolute most, and it would be more frequently.
Because I think, I forget what band. Oh, I think it's Emery actually. Emery, I know they hold all their cards in their own hand. They own all their most of their masters and all that kind of stuff. So like they're basically able to do whatever they want, how they want to do it. But it was interesting to see that they're kind of going what Protest the Hero was doing about a year or two ago, where they're like, we're just going to go right to the fans and we're going to give you something. And if you want to support us, here's the way to do it. Yeah. And I understand, like, being on a label, that's not quite the structure and how you can do things. No. But it's just, everything's changing. So it's, wondering if you guys are dealing with that on a label perspective, where they're like, hey, like, maybe we get an EP kind of to tide people over soon.
Our label's awesome. They're very open to ideas, and they're very open to kind of attempting the non-conventional. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always push through, but they're open to it. So I think that we definitely want to kind of change some things and just, I guess, for lack of a better word, do things in a little bit more of a current way. The reality is if the populace is digesting music in a certain way, and that's the most efficient way that they're doing it, everyone should do it that way. It's not that big of a shift. It's just go with, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. If you have a breakfast restaurant and your most famous thing is pancakes, you better have plenty of pancakes. Right. Like, just give them the damn pancakes. Like, just, if people want short doses and need more, like, smaller shit more often, just give it to them. They're going to get the same amount of music. You know what I mean? If you're going to get a 12-song album and you're going to digest 4 songs, and then you're going to forget it, and that's going to last you 6 months, but the band's still going to wait another year or longer to make a record, like, why don't we just give you 5 songs every 6 months? And you'll fully digest them, and the streams will be more, and the sales will be more, and then 6 months later, you put out another one. Right. You can still, do the studio the same way. You can go and record 20 songs, and there's your next 3 years, right. But I don't know. I think that you need to adapt to the monetary shift. You need to adapt to how people are digesting music, or else, like I said, you have this heart and soul you poured into like a 12-song album, and 40% of it gets paid attention to, and the rest is like, I don't remember that part.
It's just weird to see the multifacetedness of the various bands you're in and the way that they all kind of work, with 2 of the 3 being on labels and kind of having a more structured, like, here's the release, here's the singles, blah, 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 here's the promo plan, to then American Gentlemen, which seems like just when it's done and it makes sense, we drop it.
I get a wild hair at my ass, and I'm like, hey, let's do it. Hey, C4, you want to release the EP next week? He's like, yeah. I'm like, here's the album art. I mean, I'm literally releasing a solo single next week. Okay. Like, because I just felt like it. Know what I mean?
And see, I feel like you're in that unique position where you can kind of speak to either side of this, like where you're like, I'm kind of the independent artist, kind of getting to ride what's currently happening, but I'm also still a part of this major label system that has to do things a certain way.
Of course. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely ride both, and each serve a great purpose for each other, I mean, doing radio and publicity and distribution, all those things ourselves would be very possible, but we have to come up with a lot of money ourselves up front, and it would take a lot of manpower and a lot of people involved. And it's like, for us right now, the better option is just be a band, focus on being a band, writing great music, and let the label do what they're supposed to do. Luckily, we're with a label that actually does what they're supposed to do. So.
And lastly, where can everyone find you and or any of the bands that you would like to plug?
Everything is, I would say, Instagram. The Brandon Saller for me on Instagram. Also on Spotify, you can just look up Brandon Saller, or you can look up American Gentlemen, or you can look up Hell or High Water, or you can look up Bad Brother, or you can look up Atreyu. But if you follow me on Instagram, the Brandon Saller, you will find all things that I'm doing at all times, which sometimes it's way too many things, but they will all be there.
My absolute last question, because I forgot to ask you this the last time, and I remember saying this to Porter and to Gioi. Do you do any Sammy Hagar covers at all?
No. Why? Should I?
Yes. After hearing I Want It All, I was like, Jesus Christ, like, I think you could probably do
I
some,
do
like,
go pretty Hagar
Montrose
on that
like
song. I Can't Drive 65. 55?
55, yeah.
55.
Well, I was even thinking, like, you could maybe do, like, Paper Money or, like
yeah.
old Sammy stuff.
I'll fuck with it. I can fuck with it. Yeah, that song is pretty Hagar. Yeah. I didn't try to. It just happened.
I just remember hearing that, and I was like, God damn, this boy's got some pipes on him.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time, and looking forward to the show tonight.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
So that was my Cinco de Mayo conversation with Brandon Saller of Atreyu. Had a lot of fun with that, like I said in the intro, kind of going over the band's legacy at that point. And, it's been kind of weird. Like, ever since this interview happened, I've been talking to a couple other band people, and, like, on Justice podcast recently, he had Doc Coyle on, and they were talking about how Atreyu has endured probably more success now since they came back than they did even at the height of their popularity back in the day. And it's been kind of interesting to see a lot of other band musicians and people and people in the industry, speak so highly of them, when it seems like a lot of people have kind of, I don't want to say shamed a lot of bands, but, they put them and Thrice in the same category. It's like, sometimes bands go away and they come back better than they were. And sometimes it's just that they needed to recharge their batteries and figure out who they are now versus trying to capture who they were and trying to keep appeasing those fans at that point.
Yeah, and that's really hard to do, and most bands fail at it anyway, as far as like trying to appease people. I mean, Under Oath pretty much kind of did the same thing with more mixed results, I think. But I totally understood the sentiment behind what they were doing. But yeah, with Atreyu, it definitely is one of those. They're just one of those bands where they're kind of finally cashing the check, all these years later. In that, they weren't. They were popular, before, but whenever they went away and came back in a very real way, because a lot of bands, whenever they come back, they're still kind of in fizzle out phase. Have you noticed that? Like, that a band will come back, but like they'll be working at an output that's like significantly slower than what it was before. Whereas Atreyu is kind of one of the first bands, or not first bands, but one of the only bands that kind of came back full bore.
I think there's a difference though, because like one of the first bands I'm thinking of when you say something like that is I'm thinking of Bleeding Through right out the gate.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But Bleeding Through, when they decided that they were going to come back, I think 5 years after their last record and 2 or 3 after their last show, I think, they very much, and Brandon even kind of, I think, said it in our interview, Brandon Schappetti, this vocalist of Bleeding Through, had kind of made the comment that it's like, we just got burned out. Like, we were in a constant cycle of tour, make an album, tour, make an album, tour, make an album, tour, and make an album. And at some point, you just need to, like, it's almost like for the sanity of like everybody, you just kind of need to be like, okay, this is done. And like, I think that's the only way maybe at times that a label will understand, like, oh, okay, like we can't keep milking this thing, that it's like, okay, we're done, we exist no more, don't book us,
we quit.
Yeah. And it's like, it kind of sucks that it has to come to that to I think have that desired outcome of just getting some time away and being able to recharge, so when you come back to the thing, you're more excited. But I mean, almost every band that's done that, though. I mean, Bleeding Through is a great example. That last record, like the record they put out before this most recent one, I fucking hated that record. It sounded tired. It just sounded like a band going through the motions. However, the newest record sounds phenomenal and sounds like a band that was hungry, that wanted to get into the studio, that wanted to write fucking banger songs, and the whole album is great. Atreyu has put out 2 very interesting records since they came back. One that went more, back to the aggressive sound that everyone wanted. And then they did something kind of in the middle of everything and kind of is in a more adult, grown-up version of Atreyu that I think they tried doing on, Congregation of the Damned, but just didn't land. I think a lot of people were, basically expecting a follow-up to The Curse, or they wanted, another A Death Grip on Yesterday, or even there were a lot of fans that came on during Lead Sail and A Paper Anchor. And, like, those are 3 completely different albums, and unless you were a fan that started all the way back at the beginning and kind of followed the band throughout, and you're able to see that, the growth of the band at that point, I think it is kind of hard. If you were a fan of, like, Death Grip, and you went backwards, you might be like, oh, this is too heavy, or I'm not really into the screaming as much. But then if you came in on Congregation, you might kind of look at it and go like, well, I don't like, it went too poppy over here or whatever. Like,
not heavy.
Yeah, it's like I feel like it was just those were kind of, it's a very divisive era of the band, and I think it's interesting now. Like, you look at the Spotify numbers and everything, and some of their best songs, streaming wise and so forth, are the new stuff, and I think that's a really great indicator that a lot of people like the new stuff in conjunction with everything that's come before it. Although a lot of people don't say anything about Congregation of the Damned at all, so
yeah, not really. It's under the rug somewhere.
Yeah, but no, this was a lot of fun. I think for a lot of longtime fans, something that we highlighted in the previous chat Dan and I did was we wanted to highlight Brandon's overall songwriting career, because it's very interesting and diverse, and there are things that kind of sound similar. And that was the thing I enjoyed talking to him about. Was like, okay, like you did the sync project in American Gentlemen, or even Hell or High Water, which has more viability in the streaming and syncs aspect. what do you take from that and bring to Atreyu? And then it's like when, he's like, oh, the time is now. Like, I knew that's the perfect sync. That's the single. Like, I have experience now working in that kind of a realm to know, like, this is the song we push first. This is how we get this thing off the ground. And obviously it's working because that was a monster first single and so forth. So it's one of those that it's interesting to talk to someone that's kind of versed in the industry in a few different realms and how it applies to the projects that he's doing. And, I don't think we've really talked a whole lot about sync opportunities and so forth on this podcast, but it is something that's really interesting to hear people be rather upfront and honest, like, because there's other musicians that do this, that have projects where it's like, oh, what's the point of this? It's like, oh, basically this is just to get on commercials and get paid.
Right, exactly. It's I definitely remember going over that in the interview, and it just being kind of this honest, like, yeah, this is how we do it.
If you would like to follow Atreyu on everything, go to Facebook at Atreyu, Instagram at Atreyu Official, as well as Twitter at Atreyu Official. If you would like to keep up with Hell or High Water, you can find them on Facebook at Hell or High Water Official. Same on Instagram, and Twitter is just simply Hell or High Water. If you would like to keep up with Brandon, you can find him at the Brandon Saller on Instagram and Brandon Kyle Saller on Twitter. And if you would like to keep up with American Gentlemen, you can find them on Facebook at American Gents and Instagram at We Are American Gentlemen. And if you would like to keep up with Metal Nexus, you can go to metalnexus.net, Facebook at Metal Nexus, Instagram at metal.nexus, or Twitter at metal_nexus. And Dan will tell you all about where he can be found.
Well, I can be found on Twitter at DiscussMetalDan. I can be found on Gmail at discussmetaldan@gmail.com. I can be found on Facebook under Daniel Terry. And as always, you can find my other podcast, Discography Discussion, at discussmetal.com.
And if you would like to keep up with all things this podcast, you can find us simply enough at BrewSpeak Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Check us out on YouTube over at BrewSpeak Pod. You can see the videos where they are applicable. We couldn't shoot one of this one because it was too dark in the dressing room we were at, so just the sweet, sweet sounds of Brandon's voice. And if you would like to check us out and support our podcast monetarily, you can head over to patreon.com/BrewSpeakPod. We got a lot of lovely perks over there. Let us know what you would like to see us talk about, maybe some other tiers that you would like to do, maybe Ozzy Osbourne. If you're into No More Tears, just let us know. And for the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
And we will talk to you all next time.